Let's dive right in. Welcome to this explainer, where we're unpacking Julius Caesar's own chilling, first-hand accounts from Book 5 of the Gallic War. We're going to take what looks like a dense historical text and translate it into what is, quite frankly, a true ancient thriller.
Because we're dropping right into a gripping narrative of imperial hubris, catastrophic leadership failures, and a literal ticking clock rescue mission. What actually happens when the greatest, seemingly invincible war machine of the ancient world is suddenly divided, totally deceived, and completely surrounded? Well, let's find out.
Section 1. The British Expedition, the Second Invasion. Our story kicks off with the sheer, awe-inspiring scale of Roman logistics.
Caesar launches his massive second invasion across the Channel into Britain, and get this, he brings a staggering 800 ships. They all arrive on the coast at exactly the same time. It was an armada so terrifying, so massive, that the native British forces took one look, completely abandoned the shoreline, and fled straight for the high grounds. I mean, imagine looking out at the horizon and seeing that fleet coming right at you.
Now, when the Britons did finally try to fight back, they used heavily fortified woods to ambush the Romans. But of course, the Romans had a mechanical answer to this. The 7th Legion simply locked their shields together and formed a testudo. It's basically a brilliant human tank formation of interlocking tortoise-shell shields. They use this to safely breach the enemy defenses and drive them out of the woods with barely a scratch. At this point, the Romans seemed completely unstoppable, right?
Section 2. A harsh winter, divided legions. Well, that feeling of Roman invincibility? Yeah, it was incredibly short-lived.
Upon returning to Gaul after the British campaign, they found that a severe drought had completely ruined the crops. Caesar is forced to make a highly dangerous strategic compromise here. To avoid mass famine, he has to split his legions across geographically isolated territories. You've got Fabius with the Morini, Cicero with the Nervii, Labienus with the Trivieri, and Sabinus and Cotta sharing a command with the Eburones. This geographic isolation leaves the entire Roman army highly vulnerable.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Ambiorix Deception, a deadly trap.
This exact geographic isolation is what the Gallic leader Ambiorix exploits. He launches a surprise attack on the winter camp commanded by Sabinus and Cotta. Now, when his initial physical assault fails, Ambiorix switches tactics to a far deadlier weapon: psychological warfare. He claims that all of Gaul is rising up, that German mercenaries are just days away, and he offers the Romans a deceptive truce. Basically, hey, you have safe passage if you just abandon your camp.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute danger of divided leadership. This deception violently fractures the Roman commanders, leading to a fateful, incredibly tense debate. On one side, you have Sabinus arguing in a total panic, demanding they flee immediately before these supposed German reinforcements arrive. On the other side, Cotta demands they hold the line. He argues, quite rightly, that they are in a fortified camp, they have plenty of food, and you must never, ever take orders from an armed enemy.
But Sabinus plays a really dirty political trick. He yells his arguments at the top of his lungs so the rank-and-file soldiers outside the tent can hear him. He's essentially manipulating the fear of his own men to pressure his co-commander. This grueling debate drags on until midnight, until a battered, exhausted Cotta finally just yields. And that leads to the disastrous decision to pack their bags and march out at dawn, trusting the word of a man who had literally just tried to kill them.
Section 4. Disaster in the woods. The ambush. So, the next morning, the Romans march out. They're weighed down with heavy baggage and strung out in this long, extended line, walking straight into a trap Ambiorix had laid just 2 miles away in a deep valley. Caught in the ambush, Sabinus completely loses his mind. He's running around timidly, giving useless orders. Cotta violently tries to lead from the front, but their desperate command to form a defensive orb only seals their doom. It completely destroys Roman morale, shows the Gauls they are terrified, and sparks mass panic as soldiers abandon the fight just to protect their personal baggage. This stark contrast in leadership ends in total annihilation. Sabinus, still somehow thinking he can negotiate, is tricked into a parley and murdered while begging for his life. Cotta is killed taking a sling stone straight to the face while fighting on the front lines. In a final act of utter desperation, a standard-bearer throws the legion's eagle over the camp walls to save it from capture right before being cut down. By nightfall, the few surviving soldiers, despairing of any safety, commit suicide. An entire Roman legion is violently erased from history.
Section 5. The Siege of Cicero. Holding the line.
Elated by this unprecedented slaughter, Ambiorix immediately force marches to the Nervii tribe, rallying a massive horde to surround the winter camp of Quintus Cicero. And what's absolutely terrifying here is that the Gauls have clearly been taking notes on Roman engineering. Using only their swords and their bare hands, they managed to build siege towers, mobile shields called mantelets, and a massive 11-foot rampart circling the entire camp, all in under 3 hours.
So, Ambiorix goes to the camp gates and tries the exact same deception on Cicero that worked so well on Sabinus. He offers them safe passage if they just leave. But Cicero, he hits him with an absolute brick wall of stoic Roman discipline. He tells him, it is not the custom of the Roman people to accept any condition from an armed enemy. Cicero completely refuses to budge. The siege begins in earnest.
Inside the camp, amidst a horrifying storm of flaming javelins setting their thatched roofs on fire, we get this incredible story of Roman resolve. 2 rival centurions, Pulfio and Varenus, guys who've literally hated each other for years, decide to settle their dispute by charging out the front gates into the thick of the enemy horde. They end up saving each other's lives in brutal hand-to-hand combat. It perfectly captures the ferocious, unyielding spirit of Cicero's camp. They simply refuse to break.
Section 6. Caesar's Rescue. A desperate mission.
With casualties mounting daily, Cicero's only hope is a Gallic slave who miraculously manages to smuggle a message out by wrapping it around a javelin. What follows is a sheer masterclass in rapid military logistics. Caesar receives the desperate plea at the 11th hour of the day. By midnight, he's already marching his available troops out. He covers 20 miles the very next day, and by day 3, he has a scout throw a spear with a letter written in Greek over Cicero's walls, promising that help is finally coming.
But there's a massive problem. Realizing Caesar is coming, a Gallic force of 60,000 armed men abandons the siege of Cicero's camp and turns to intercept Caesar's tiny relief army.
Caesar has barely 7,000 men. He is outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. So, knowing he can't win in a straight fight, he plays a brilliant psychological game of his own. He purposefully builds his camp on a much smaller footprint than usual, and he orders his men to act absolutely terrified. He's projecting total weakness just to draw the Gauls onto disadvantaged ground.
So, how exactly does he execute this trap? First, he feigns retreat in minor cavalry skirmishes. Second, he builds his ramparts unusually high to look like he's hiding in fear. Third, he barricades the gates weakly with just single rows of turf. He literally lures the overconfident Gauls in so close that they actually start tearing down the Roman ramparts with their bare hands. And then, step 4, he unleashes a sudden, devastating, coordinated cavalry sally from all gates at once. This completely shatters the Gallic forces and saves Cicero's camp.
Caesar ultimately saves the day, but this brutal winter campaign leaves us with a stark historical lesson. In fact, if we want to extract 3 practical steps for implementation when you're managing a crisis of your own, history spells them out right here. Step 1. Maintain a unified front. Divided leadership like Sabinus and Cotta just invites destruction. Step 2. Never negotiate from a position of weakness with a hostile adversary. Hold the line like Cicero. And step 3. When massively outmatched, control the narrative through psychological misdirection, exactly like Caesar did to turn the tables. So I leave you with this final thought. When your own crisis strikes and you are completely surrounded, do you panic like Sabinus or do you hold the line like Cicero?